Hi, everyone. We are a small group so far. We're going to give everybody just another minute or two to pop on. If anybody wants to turn on their camera, because we're a small group, we're really going to be able to take questions. But if not, that is okay. We are recording. Great. So I'm going to respect that folks are here on time. We're going to jump right in and we will have plenty of times for questions. For those of you that I haven't met yet, I'm Meredith Lewis. I'm the Senior Director of Community Impact and Partnerships. And you'll see my colleagues, Jeff Markham, Margaret Everett, and Jennifer McNeil are also here. We're mostly going to be talking about what we as a community foundation and Community Foundation of Western Mass require for fiscally sponsored organizations. I want to start by saying that we're committed to both working with fiscally sponsored organizations. First of all, there are just a lot of barriers in the nonprofit ecosystem that mean that people can't start nonprofits, right? Like that in itself has some real systematic inequities and challenges. Secondly, like great ideas oftentimes emerge through fiscal sponsorship before becoming nonprofits. And lastly, great ideas stay as fiscally sponsored organizations. There's some pretty big initiatives that, for a variety of reasons, becoming a nonprofit doesn't make sense, particularly in some of our focus areas. So we're committed not only to working with fiscally sponsored orgs, we're committed to making it easier. We've just started embarking on a multi-year process, which will include focus groups with organizations that are fiscally sponsored and are fiscally sponsoring folks. So some of you might get some outreach from us to say, hey, what works about this? What doesn't work? We're going to be updating our policies, trying to make it easier. And we're hoping to do some piloting to welcome new fiscal sponsors to the region so that we have more available options that we all collectively feel good about. So we're excited to be able to share this. But in the short term, we also wanted to make sure that for this round of flexible funding, fiscally sponsored organizations can apply and know what we're asking of them. No secrets, no surprises. Can I get a thumbs up if folks can see a PowerPoint?
Yep.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Meredith, could you drop a co-host on me so I can
Yeah, can I
if
drop a co-host? I've never been asked that. I like that.
no
All right.
my new
I
lingo
can. I
here.
think it's Margaret's turn.
Nope. Okay.
Somebody then. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So all of this information is available already recorded and posted on our website, our strategic focus areas. But a quick reminder, we're going to be funding, I believe, we collectively believe 100% in our strategic focus areas. So these are the four that Community Foundation has been funding in for the past 4 years. We do them across the region, regardless of where you're located. That's racial justice, post-secondary education and training, a strong start for children, which is really focused on 0 to 5, and a vibrant arts and creativity ecosystem known as Valley Creates. If you want to deep dive into that, you can check out the recording that we previously have up there. You can talk to us. We also have more details on the website. This year, we're also in partnership with Mass Mutual under 4 focus areas for them that are generally under the bucket of financial resilience. That's not surprising. Mass Mutual's foundation is committed to similar work that Mass Mutual is doing. So that includes building networks to help people navigate financial ecosystems. And that's not just banks. That is considered broader than that. Fostering financial health for folks, fulfilling basic needs for Mass Mutual specifically, that is childcare, food security, and housing, and expanding employment opportunities, which includes post-secondary education and training, as well as small business support. And the third that we're also really excited about are Franklin County funds, also focused on family economic resiliency. So there is some overlap and some distinction based on geography. For Franklin County, we're looking at food security, housing security, and other basic needs, health, transportation, human services. If you're not sure if you fit, have a conversation with us. We're delighted to talk and learn more about your organization.
Meredith,
Yeah,
can I ask a question real quick? Are folks
please.
are blocks covering some folks' screen here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not good.
It's
Yeah.
partially covering it for me. I see 2 different
Yeah,
blocks.
How about
partially, yes.
now?
That's
There we
better.
go.
Okay,
Hey.
sorry, that was Zoom doing a little bit of its zoominess.
Yeah,
Thank you
the
for
Zoomies.
catching me on that. All
No,
right,
no.
so now as we get into the fiscally sponsored information, hopefully we can all see.
Yes.
We're good? Great. So basically, like, what is a fiscally sponsored organization? So it's a group or a project that um, that gets their tax exempt status from another organization, oftentimes an organization that is mission consistent. So that might be a larger arts nonprofit providing their tax exempt status to a smaller arts org. That also might be, there are some organizations that professionally provide fiscal sponsorship across the board. That actually is their mission. The nonprofit, the one that actually has 501c3 status, and someone must have 501c3 status, provides, generally speaking, administrative support. What that can look like can vary, but they're providing on some level financials, right? They are taking in money, they are sending money out. Oftentimes they might provide some basic guidance in the HR realm or operations realm, but they may not. And basically it allows more people to be involved in charitable activities. The best example I can think of is most artists don't wake up one morning and say, I want to be a nonprofit. Most artists wake up and say, like, I want to create art for a variety of reasons. I want to make the world more beautiful. I believe art has an impact. There are a number of grants, not only Community Foundation, the Bar Foundation, who we work with on arts, the Mass Cultural Council, that provide grants to arts organizations and artists. And so at some point, in order, because of how the US tax structure works, that you can only provide grants to organizations that have this legal tax status, other organizations come in and say, great, we'll kind of act as an intermediary. This shouldn't be wholly transactional. If your fiscally sponsored relationship is just once a year, we talk to them, that's probably not good. And I'll explain a little bit more, but ideally, like, you're in a relationship with them. We require a few things to make sure that that relationship is going to work out. There are 4 documents, and we'll go through all of them. We have our own form. We want a copy of the agreement that you have with the organization. If an organization tells you they're going to take 50% of your funds to be your fiscal sponsor, we are going to call that predatory, and we will not accept that, right? So part of this, in large part, is for us to understand the nature of a relationship and to make sure it's a good one based on our experience. We are also going to ask for financials of the nonprofit entity in this. We need to know that they're going to be around and that they can manage not only their own money, but other people's money. And we also require a copy of their board meeting minutes where they approved this. This is a financial relationship, and boards have fiduciary or financial responsibility. So in a second, I'm going to go through each one of those forms or documents, what they look like, why we require it. But I wanted to share a little bit more about the 2 types of fiscal sponsorship that we're most likely to see. This is the first one. It is called Model A in the world of fiscal sponsorships. That means nothing to you. Don't worry about it. Basically what it is that the project that we are eventually giving the money to has no legal standing. You're an individual that's doing cool, social good, charitable work. You're an entity, you're a movement, and you have no relationship with the government. You're a collective of people. You have relationship with community and the work that you are doing. A fiscal sponsor is basically saying, will be the legal entity, and it allows for private foundations, government agencies, individual donors, corporate donors, those folks that receive a tax deduction because they're donating that money or how they're structured, to take that money and then pass it to the project. So the project exists. You can see it's this awesome square and this bigger square, but there is no legal standing of the fiscally sponsored entity. The other model that might exist is that the project does exist, right? It's like, it's an LLC, it's a company, but there's something going on, and they are a separate legal entity. But for the sake of those 4 things, private foundations, of which community foundations are a part of that ecosystem, government grants, individual grants, corporate grants, the sponsor is going to be the legal entity. And basically the project will write the grant request. The project will write the grant request. The sponsor will have some kind of agreement about it, right? Grant money comes from the sponsor and the reports are done by the project. Those 4 lines are actually very similar on the previous one as well, though they're not shown. The big difference in this case is that the project does have some kind of government standing. Its government standing in this case is not a 501c3. There are other models where the nonprofit does have 501c3 status. We just don't see those as many, because if you're a 501c3, the odds are is that, like, we want to support you directly. That may not be the case. Occasionally someone's in transition or something like that, but these are the 2 models that we're most likely to see. When it comes to designating like who does what. The fiscal sponsor has the 501c3. That's who we're going to send the grant report, the grant document to. That's who we're going to send the check to. They technically, that is their money, right? We write a check to them. They have the control over that. They will be able to send if we needed a financial report. And in this case, they might communicate regularly about the project. So sometimes your fiscal sponsor might be a part of the call, but generally speaking, you're going to communicate directly with us if you're the sponsored project. We work a little differently than some other folks might, but generally, like, they're going to make sure that like the entity that's doing it is not going to tell people that they're actually a nonprofit. They're going to be maintaining the relationship with us as the donor, and in exchange, you're giving some money to the sponsor. So that's generally how the relationship works. Any questions there before I jump into what we require? Great. This is the form that we require. All of these documents are on our website. We can drop it into the chat, but if you go onto our website under nonprofits, there is a link that says resources for nonprofits, and there it says fiscally sponsored organizations forms. This is a form, and I know it's small, but we will send you the full copy of it. It's just basically the information. We need to understand who's the contact at the fiscal sponsor. Who's the contact at the entity? What are your addresses? What are your phone numbers, right? Like, this just tells us who we're dealing with, and it gives an overview of what are the dates that this partnership is good for, right? Fiscal sponsorships, generally speaking, are not infinite or until the end of time. They might say renewed upon termination, right? But oftentimes they're done for a year or a few years over a period of time. So it's important for understand when is that still good. This also is giving us the EIN of the fiscal sponsor. That's how in the operations world of foundations, that's basically the unique ID of the organization. And so we need to have that information. You'll see at the bottom that says this form is valid for 1 year. It's because people change, right? You might have a new CEO, there might be a new contact, right? Addresses might change, but also like the partnership covered. You do not need to wait in general for fiscal sponsorship, for flexible funding in order to submit this. Fiscally sponsored organizations are also eligible to receive donor advised fund grants or DAF funds at the community foundation. So you can update this whenever you want. A great time to do that is whenever you're signing a new MOU, and just like put a note in your calendar, oh, time to send community foundation the required document. So we know a lot of people are doing it now in advance of a funding request, but it definitely does not need to wait for us for a funding request. The next thing we're going to look for is the MOU. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things we're going to look for is what's the fee that's being charged to make sure that feels equitable. We're also going to be looking to say what the organization, the fiscal sponsor, is promising. Are they giving you HR support? Are they giving you operations? Are they committing to say, we will provide you a copy of your budget and your revenue and expenses on a monthly basis, right? Like, we want to understand what the parties are providing. If you say, Meredith, I don't have one of these things, that's okay. We will share, there are 2 great resources. One are from our partners at the Brookline Community Foundation over in the Boston area. They have one available on their website, as does the Colorado Trust, which is another community-based organization. But if your organization, your fiscal sponsor has done this before, we would anticipate that they would have some kind of MOU available, right? They should have done this. It's a legal document, right? So it's like an organization that is a fiscal sponsor has probably created contracts with someone else before. So this is just another contract. We're also going to ask for the financials of the nonprofit organization of the sponsor. This is almost always what the front of audited financials look like. It has this font. It tells you the dates that it covers. There is a chance that they do not have audited financials. In the state of Massachusetts, if you are greater than $500,000 of your budget, you do need to have audited financials. If you say, I don't have audited financials more recent, I only have 5 years ago, that's not okay, right? An organization actually needs to be doing a yearly audit. Sometimes there is a smaller gap. So at Community Foundation, our fiscal year ends March 31st. And so we are in the process of doing our 2024 audit. So if we were acting as a fiscal sponsor, we don't. I would anticipate to see the most current one and someone saying, our audit's going to be due September 1st, we would have time, or we anticipate our audit being available October 1st. Can I send you the latest one? And then I'll send you a new updated one. If a fiscal sponsor is between 200,000 and 500,000, they may not have an audit, but they do need to have CPA reviewed finances. There are a few exceptions here if you're using a church as a fiscal sponsor, but generally speaking, we're going to look for that. If your fiscal sponsor is smaller than that, we are going to pause for a moment. We're not saying that's impossible, but we're going to have concerns about an entity providing finances for smaller entities if they're also really small and they don't have some mandated or implemented controls on finances. So that's when you reach out to us and say, hey, it's two small organizations. Here's the nature of the relationship. We're going to ask some questions. We certainly have approved those financials, those fiscal sponsorship relationships before, but we really want to understand the financial health of the organization that is providing the sponsorship, and organizations that are audited provide the best, clearest, most objective financial health because a third party is coming in and providing an assessment of that. The thing that everyone always says, why are you asking this? I cannot find this. This is too difficult, are board meeting minutes. And so this is why we asked for it. Community Foundation, in this case, wants to pay me, okay? We are going to make a check out to Jeff, and the board has responsibility over the finances. The question that we're going to ask is, does the money get to Meredith, right? I literally wrote a check to Jeff, right? If I wanted money to go to Meredith, I would write a check to Meredith. Instead, I'm writing it to Jeff. There is an extraordinary amount of faith placed in these relationships. And because at the end of the day, the board is responsible for all of financial matters, we want to make sure that the board knows that this relationship happens, that the board understands a check is going to be made out to our organization and it is not our money, right? So why do we need the board to sign off on that? Because that's weird, right? Your board is saying, cool, we got a check, right? Jeff got a check. That's amazing. It's our money. No, it's not, right? And so that happens and should happen at a board meeting where the board, and we see the vote, right? Like 10 people were in attendance. It was a unanimous vote. 9 people were in favor, 1 abstained. Only 9 people of our 10 were, like your regular meeting minutes. If for some reason your board didn't cover this at a board meeting, they can do a resolution. So sometimes, particularly coming out of COVID, boards are able to meet electronically and approve things. So you might be sending, here's the resolution, and here are all the emails of all the people that are voting. This should not be something that is retroactive. At the point that your MOU is signed, the board should approve it. That is best practice, right? Like when you're entering into a new financial relationship, your board is approving it. We can get meeting minutes that have everything else blacklined, except that if your fiscal sponsor says we won't provide you meeting minutes, that's a problem, right? At the point at which they're approving the relationship that they're having with you. So if you say like, we've asked, they won't provide it, we need to have a conversation. The relation again between a fiscal sponsor and a fiscally sponsored entity should be one of trust, and should be first and foremost that your fiscal sponsor will provide the documents that you need to do financial interactions, including applying for grants. So while this might be something that other organizations don't ask, this isn't something that is extraordinary, and it is something that your fiscal sponsor should provide. We have made this apparent to the local fiscal sponsors, as well as some of the national ones we work with, that this is something we ask for. So again, if you say like they won't provide it, reach out to us. But this is something that at this point in time, we're not compromising about, because it oftentimes is a sign that the board doesn't know about this relationship. And the answer to this question may be unclear. And we need a definitive yes at the end of this funnel, that if we're sending the money to another organization, that you will get your money. Those are the 4 things that we ask for. If you have already been you already have had your fiscal sponsorship paperwork approved by Community Foundation, the reason you would know this is if you've gotten a grant from us before, right? That's the best way. It doesn't have to be flexible funding. It could be a donor advised fund. On a yearly basis, we ask for updated financials, and we ask for our form to be updated. But if your MOU is in good shape, and the board meeting minutes, we only ask for once. If your MOU has expired, you also need to send us the new MOU. But if the MOU says it's reviewed annually until it's not, or it's a 5-year MOU and you're still within that 5-year range, we don't need to see it. I promise you we save all those files. but every year your fiscal sponsor should be getting a new audit or should be having reviewed financials, and that form to make sure it's the same contact information, no one's moved, no one's changed. That is the basics of what we need. If you're struggling with any of these, you just email grants@communityfoundation.org, or you find one of us. Well, we have drop-in hours starting this afternoon at 1 p.m. and many more that are coming up there on the website, and I'll pop them up on the screen. You say, hey, we're trying to get this information. Here's what we're struggling. You can also have your fiscal sponsor just call us. You can say, hey, like, we work with Jeff Markham as our fiscal sponsor. Thanks for becoming an organization. And Jeff, as the sponsor, has some questions. We're happy to talk to your fiscal sponsor as well. Ideally, y'all would come to a call together and we would explain together, this collectively is what we need. We're happy to talk to people. We don't want small barriers like we didn't understand the meeting minutes or here's their state of financials to prevent an organization in our sponsor, in our focus areas who's doing great work to get in the way of you getting a grant. We know particularly for fiscally sponsored organizations, there are a lot of entities that don't grant to you. We don't want to be one of those. We want to grant to you. And we also just want to make sure that the relationship feels like it's a good shape. That is the overview. That was a fair amount of information. I am happy to take what we'll do right now are questions that feel like they're applicable to the group, right? And then we're going to kind of do this slow trickle that if you have questions that you feel like they're one-on-one, we're going to hang around. And then if you feel like there are questions that need to be in an even smaller venue, you can pop back at 1 p.m. where we'll really be in a breakout room focus. So people drop in, we answer bigger questions. But if you say, hey, I need to talk to someone individually, we'll go into breakout room and we'll go through that. And I guess the last thing I will add is that if you're not sure if you've already received a grant, if we have paperwork on file, reach out to grants@communityfoundation.org. You'll get Margaret. Margaret will look and she will tell you, we have this, we don't have this.
Meredith, the only question we had in the chat
Yeah.
was just regarding the financial requirements and whether it's for 1 year or 2 years. And I said it was just for the most recent
Just for
last
the
year.
most recent year. When it comes to the application itself, I will clarify a few things. There, you'll see in the application, for the most part, we are always going to be talking about you. We don't need the fiscal sponsor budget because we get it. We get their financials this way. We know that fiscally sponsored organizations do not legally need to have a board of directors. You're not a legal entity. The questions about the board, generally speaking, should be about your advisory committee. If you say we don't have an advisory committee, then we should talk. Because if you're a fiscally sponsored entity and you're not bringing in community members, if you don't have some kind of group that is operating and supporting you, we're going to have some questions if you're ready to receive a grant and if that's really a right fit for Community Foundation, where we center community and we look at board, but we know you do not have a board of directors. We really, really hope you have an advisory committee or you talk to us so we can understand what that structure looks like. Otherwise, all the questions should be about you. You should have your staff members. You should have a director. And again, those questions about the board of directors, we're hoping that that's going to look like some kind of advisory committee. Look, it's not a formal advisory committee because it's not a board of directors. It doesn't have those legal requirements. So how many people are on it? We're more agnostic where there are requirements for a legal board of directors for a nonprofit incorporated in Massachusetts or other states. Any other questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a statement. I think
Yeah.
one, there's a lot of information for folks, and so digesting it might take some time. The second is like, just naming that the feeling that like there's a lot of kind of hurdles to do for fiscally sponsored organizations. And it can be burdensome. One of the reasons that we've elected to do this is so to give folks time to kind of think about some of this stuff, but it's also important for us, I think, to know that it's not, which can be in philanthropy, like this inherent paternalistic way of thinking about some of this stuff, where it's like we're trying to mandate, and that's not the place. Some of this is part of that, like the financial regulations that we have to go through. Part of it is some of that, but the main part of like doing this is, one, to have you have all the information, and two, know that your relationship with the fiscal sponsor is deeper than sometimes is happening in relationships that we've seen in the past. And so there are requirements that a good fiscal sponsor will meet, because it is part of this is the social good they do for organizations. Part of it is an income generator for organizations as well, right? And so if you're paying an organization to do these things, there are some responsibilities that they have to you. And so I just wanted to make sure that folks know that it's really, there is like the technical roadblocks that we have to get through to affirm that you can be paid. But it's also like, we want you to know that you should be empowered in this relationship to ask for the things that you need to ask for, and also should be responsive to you as an organization. And part of the work that Meredith outlined in the very beginning, in terms of we're doing some research and analysis or in the ecosystem of fiscal sponsors in our region, is to identify those things that make a good fiscal sponsor, and to help bolster those in organizations so that we can have a really good, or develop really good habits and relationships between these fiscal sponsors and collections of folks that are utilizing their services, or organizations that are using their services. So I just wanted to name that. It seems like a lot. It is a lot. But it's not just for the sake of doing it. There is real rationale, not only in just getting folks paid, but also in like what you should be receiving from these people you're in relationship with,
Yeah, I think the number one thing that we hear from fiscally sponsored orgs is like, I don't know where my budget stands. I don't know what checks have come in. I don't know who they've paid. And we're like, oh, do you get a monthly statement of your expenses and revenue? And they're like, no. And we're like, do you ask for it? And if the answer is like, we forgot to ask for it, we're like, that's a bummer they don't send it you proactively. But if you say, yeah, we've asked for it a whole bunch of times and they're not giving us our financial information, that raises a red flag to
Yeah.
us on your behalf. We don't want you to be operating without being able to see your finances, right? If they said, we're going to send this information to this grant to this organization because you asked us to, and they didn't, like that doesn't make us feel good either. Like we want you to be able to do your work. Alyssa asked a question in the chat. I just want to raise it up. It was specifically about Fractured Atlas. There are some entities that almost all they do is capacity building and fiscal sponsorship. Fractured Atlas works with artists. TSNE, which is Third Sector New England, particularly has a strong presence in this region of fiscal sponsorship. The Social Good Fund. Those are great places. If you work with them, we're familiar. We can fund multiple entities in our region under their umbrella. We're not, there's no limit on that, right? So if we had 10 arts organizations that were great, they were all under Fractured Atlas, we'll write 10 different checks to Fractured Atlas, but we want to make sure that y'all are all in good standing with them. If you're using a local fiscal sponsor, that's great as well. Some organizations locally, this may be new to them. And so they might have questions about, we think we want to do it. Our board has questions. We hope for the point of flexible funding that you're ready in a relationship. It's a hard thing to create only in 3 weeks if someone hasn't done it, but you might be doing something that feels close to this and you haven't concretized it. We really want to encourage you to formalize it, right? Like put those protections that say, I'll do this for you, you'll do this for me. We're agreeing on it. Hopefully that means everything works out well, but if there is a snag somewhere along the way, you have a document that says, hey, we said we did this and you did this. Looks like we're missing the mark. How do we rectify that? So again, I really appreciate Jeff. I know that some of this does sound paternalistic or sounds like we know best. I think what we're saying is that we have some lived experience that is broader beyond just seeing one organization. And you also have experience that you can bring to us, right? And so we, again, want to be in a relationship, want to understand, but this feels really important to you. Z, great question. On the application itself, you can submit all of that information. For some reason, if it's easier for your fiscal sponsor to send information directly to us, they can do that to grants@communityfoundation.org. But generally speaking, it's better for them to send all of this to you. You are the applicant in our portal, and you should be able to have a copy of their audited financials. The audited financials for the Community Foundation that I showed earlier, those are available on our website to the entire public, right? Like by the time that you're a big organization that you're doing this type of work, you're not going to be secretive about your financials. Fractured Atlas, for example, has a portal, and all of the financially sponsored organizations can go into their portal and pull down that information. So if your organization says we can't send you the financials, let us know, right? Like they should be able to. If they say we can't send you all of our meeting minutes, for sure that makes sense. They should either be able to redline it, or they can send it directly to us. But let's be in conversation. And I think most importantly, like let's not wait till September 16th. Like let's start these conversations now so that if we do hit some barriers, if folks are on vacation, we're gonna get all of this done well in advance of our application deadline.
And Meredith, I know you've referenced the office hours this afternoon, the drop-in event. It is virtual. I put the Zoom link in the chat for people who wish to attend. And if you can't make it this afternoon, we also have drop-in hours next Friday from 10 to 1. And then we continue to have them in September as well. So,
and you can also email grants@communityfoundation.org and we can set up one-on-ones outside of those, particularly for fiscally sponsored organizations. The earlier, the better. We're happy to meet with you again, individually, your fiscally sponsor, both even to just say, like, if you need a copy of where on the Community Foundation website, does it say we need this information? Again, we'll throw that in there, but happy to talk. There are, I would say for the most part, the fiscal sponsors in this region and nationally that support our organizations are great. They enable you to receive money. And if there are snags, we just want to work through it collectively. Great. So we're going to do that thing where if you've gotten everything that you need, or if you have individual questions and you want to send us an email or come by at 1 o'clock, that's great. And we'll say goodbye. And for those folks that have additional questions, happy for folks to come off mute and take those, but we'll like officially close so that you can go do the work that you need to do this lovely Friday.